Nicholas II, the last Czar of Russia, was just 13 years old when he first set eyes on his future wife, the ravishing German Princess Alexandra of Hesse. It was love at first sight. At least that's how the story goes. And soon after meeting her, the two were inseparable. They rode horses together, danced cheek to cheek, and strolled the grounds of the palace holding hands. They also openly expressed their desire to marry one another, which greatly upset both of their families. But who exactly was Alexandra? What was she like as a person? And what sort of life did she and Nicholas share together? Stay tuned as we look back at the scandalous romance of the last Tsar and his true love Alexandra. Early life and family. Alexandra Feodorovna was born on June 25, 1872, at the castle of Eliahov in Hessen, Germany. Her parents, Princess Louis of Battenberg and Ernest, Duke of Hesse, and by Rhine, named her after her great-grandmother, Grand Duchess Alexandra of Russia, and her godmother, who was the wife of Emperor Friedrich III of Germany. From an early age, Alexandra displayed an independent spirit, a strong will, and a compassionate heart. She grew up speaking both German and English fluently, as well as some French, and she was especially close to her mother, who encouraged her daughter's interest in art and literature. In 1878, Alexandra contracted a rare but serious illness called acute colitis. She spent several months recovering from the disease, during which time she developed a strong bond with her doctors, including the famous physician Joseph von Mikulich, who would later become her personal doctor. After making a full recovery, she returned to school and was educated at home by private tutors. The outbreak of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870 interrupted her studies once again. This time she fled with her family to Florence, Italy, where they stayed until the conflict ended. Upon returning to Germany, she continued her education and reconnected with an old friend, her cousin, Prince Henry of Prussia, whom she hadn't seen since she was 2, upon learning that their families were seeking to end the long-standing feud between the houses of Windsor and Saxe-Coburg and Gotha by uniting their families through marriage. Alexandra and her cousin Henry agreed to wed. However, this plan fell apart when Henry developed cold feet about marrying his cousin. So he broke off the engagement and instead married a different woman. Shortly after, a royal romance. In 1889, Alexandra's mother arranged for her to meet the most eligible bachelor in Russia, the Grand Duke Nicholas Alexandrovich, heir to the throne. The two met in St. Petersburg at the Russian Imperial Palace and immediately hit it off. In fact, it was love at first sight. According to legend, Nicholas had been searching for his soulmate his entire life and knew without a shadow of a doubt that Alexandra was the one he had been waiting for. There is some debate over whether or not Alexandra felt the same way about him, as some biographers claim that she was reluctant to marry anyone so closely related to her own family. Either way, the two quickly became inseparable. They wrote letters and poems to each other, snuck away from their royal duties to steal moments together whenever they could. And they were frequently seen walking hand in hand around the gardens of the palace or riding horses together. Their romance was the talk of the town, and many wondered when the couple would finally announce their engagement. However, their relationship did not come without its critics. Many members of Nicholas's family and court disapproved of Alexandra and believed that she was too free-spirited and headstrong to be a suitable bride for their beloved Nicholas. Others argued that a German princess with no ties to the Russian royal family was an unlikely candidate to become Empress. Despite the naysayers, Nicholas and Alexandra were determined to be together. In 1893, they announced their engagement, and the Russian people erupted in joy. The engagement party was one of the biggest events in Russian history, with thousands of people lining the streets to catch a glimpse of the happy couple. Nicholas was only 18 years old at the time, while Alexandra was 21. The road to the throne. In 1894, Alexandra's father-in-law, Alexander III, died of lung cancer, making Nicholas the new Tsar of Russia. Only days later, he and Alexandra were married in a somber ceremony at the Cathedral of the Nativity in St. Petersburg. The new Tsarina's wedding gown was a beautiful ivory satin trimmed with orange blossoms, and she wore a diamond tiara on her head, which had belonged to her grandmother, Grand Duchess Alexandra. Although the wedding was not as joyous an occasion as the engagement party, the newlyweds were overjoyed to finally be man and wife. After their marriage, Nicholas and Alexandra embarked on a series of lavish parties and royal outings. They hosted grand balls at the Winter Palace, went on hunting trips to the Imperial Hunting Lodge, and took pleasure cruises on the Imperial yacht, the Standard, with their close friend, King Edward VII of Great Britain and Ireland. Nicholas and Alexandra were madly in love, and their affection for one another was obvious to everyone around them. The new Tsar was known for being shy and reserved, while his wife was outgoing and vivacious. But despite their differences, they were a perfect match, and their marriage was happy and passionate. Though Nicholas and Alexandra enjoyed the finer things in life, they were largely oblivious to the plights of their impoverished subjects. While they were taking pleasure cruises on the Black Sea, the Russian people were suffering through famines. Nicholas was far more interested in smoking cigars, driving his motor car, and playing with his toy trains than he was with the problems plaguing his country. He famously said, "I abhor politics," and he left the governing to his ministers, most of whom were unqualified for their positions. Unfortunately, this lack of leadership would have dire consequences for both the royal family and the nation as a whole. World War I and the Russian Revolution. In 1914, World War I erupted, and Russia found itself at war with Germany, Austria-Hungary, and their allies. As the conflict dragged on, the Russian people became increasingly frustrated with Nicholas's ineffective leadership and the country's involvement in the war. By 1916, the mood in Russia had turned. The February Revolution erupted in St. Petersburg, now known as Petrograd. Thousands of women marched on the city's main buildings, demanding peace, bread, and land. Soon, soldiers were abandoning their posts and joining the protesters on the streets. Within 24 hours, the entire city was in chaos. By March, the Provisional Committee of the State, Duma, had assumed control of the government, and Nicholas II had abdicated the throne. He and his family were placed under house arrest at the family cottage in the suburbs. Then in October, the Bolsheviks seized power, and Nicholas and his family were sent to Siberia to keep them safe from anti-royalist agitators. Nicholas's younger brother, Grand Duke Michael Alexandrovich, had been proclaimed emperor. But within days, he too abdicated the throne, officially ending the 300-year-old Romanov dynasty. The family spent their final Christmas together in the small village of Yekateringorg, living in a small wooden house with only a few servants to attend to them. They celebrated with a simple dinner of porridge, eggs, and fish, far from the caviar and champagne they were accustomed to. The last Tsar and his family's demise. On July 16, 1918, Nicholas, Alexandra, and their children, along with several former courtiers and servants, were led out of the basement of the house by armed Bolshevik soldiers. They were told that they were being moved to another location for their own safety. However, this was a ruse, and the family was actually being taken to a nearby mine shaft where they would be executed. One by one, the family members were shot and killed by firing squads until there were none left. Nicholas and Alexandra were the last to go. They embraced and fell to the ground, mortally wounded. Nicholas was shot 5 times, and Alexandra was hit 4 times. The couple died instantly, but their bodies were mutilated beyond recognition by the soldiers. In order to hide evidence of the crime, their bodies were then burned, and their ashes scattered in a nearby forest. Legacy. The execution of Nicholas and Alexandra brought an end to the Romanov dynasty, which had ruled Russia for more than 300 years. But the memory of the last Tsar and his family lives on in the hearts and minds of the Russian people. Their tragic story has been immortalized in books, films, and works of art, and their legacy continues to fascinate people around the world. Nicholas and Alexandra may be gone, but they will never be forgotten. Now it's time to hear from you. What did you find most interesting about the relationship between Nicholas II and Alexandra? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe. We've got lots more royal mishaps coming your way.